Hi, welcome to the channel. My name's Jared. Welcome to Growers Academy. Today we're going to be talking pruning on capsicum. Now, why do you need to prune your plants? You know, a lot of farmers in the field, they just go ahead, put their plant in the ground and let it grow and harvest the fruit later. And that is fine if you're just looking for the lowest amount of labor input and effort. But here in the glasshouse, we're all about uniformity and high production. We need to decide on how many heads we're going to grow each of these plants on to keep it in balance and give us the best production. Each of these different varieties are going to require a different number of heads. So for example, the blocky capsicum traditionally like to be on about 2 heads. The sweet pointed like to be on about 2 to 3 heads, and the snacking traditionally on 3 heads. And the reason for that is that the fruit size between these is quite a bit different, and the vigor on each of these plants is quite a bit different. So on the blockies, you know, traditionally you're seeing 200 to 300 gram fruit. Sweet pointed is around 90 to 150, and the snacking can be 15 to 40 grams. You could have 30 snacking fruit on a stem, you could have 15 sweet pointed on a stem, and you might only have about 10 at best on a blocky capsicum. So if we have too many heads and too many fruit, what it's going to cause is unevenness. So the heads with too many fruit are going to come weak and short, and that's going to make it really hard for steering the crop, irrigation, climate, picking, for example, and it might even affect the quality because the different plants with different number of heads are going to need different amounts of water. So having the right number of heads to balance with the right number of fruit is going to help us maintain uniformity throughout the crop. Breaking it down even further from that, like I said, 2 heads for a blocky crop is generally about where you start, but that's not to say that in certain conditions you might want to go to 1 head or 3 head. Every variety and different conditions are slightly different. Maybe you have no heating, maybe the crop's really strong, or maybe you really want a 300 and 350 gram fruit, so in that case you want less pieces of fruit on your plant. When the plant comes from the nursery, usually the head is about to split. So before the point it splits, it's just a single stem with no heads. After it splits, you could get 1, 2, 3, or sometimes even 4 different heads, and it's our job to pick the most uniform, best heads out of those to continue from the season. If you make a bad decision with picking those first heads, that's going to continue on for the rest of the season. Traditionally, unlike tomatoes, you don't add density as you get to summer. Yes, it's possible, but usually once you choose those first heads, the lateral is a lot weaker and lower down in the plant, and it's always trailing behind the main heads. So it's going to have less light, it's going to be less productive. You get the best, most even split right from the beginning. So the setting the plant up goes through about 3 different levels. You've got the initial split, you've got the second split, and usually by the 3rd split onwards, you can usually see that the lateral is quite underdeveloped compared to the head, and it makes the decision for which one is the head and pruning on later a lot easier. So here I have you set up, and actually you can see one of the main reasons why we're going to do this first prune, and that is that the leaves from its neighbors are actually crossing over. So why is that a bad thing? Well, one of the reasons we did the initial staking and we split the plants apart was to give each of the plant space so it could grow leaves and photosynthesize. Now the problem is, now the leaves are crossing over and competing for light. Now the reason that's an issue is that first of all it's going to slow down the growth because it's going to minimize the amount of light going to each of the plants. Secondly, it's going to cause the plants to stretch because they're going to compete for light from each other, and it's going to force them to grow very rapidly in height. Problem for peppers because we don't really have the capacity to layer them like you would do with tomatoes, and the stretchy long cells seem to be a lot more susceptible to fungal infections later on, like Pythium or Fusarium. The other reason why we want to do the prune now is that actually we don't need all of these heads, and the longer we grow these heads, the more energy that the plant puts into growing each of them that actually it could put into the heads we want and the fruit we want. So there's 2 main components to this. One is we're going to be thinning down the amount of shoots to the 2 main stems that we want to continue for the whole season, and the other part is removing the fruit that we don't need. So if you actually look at this plant from the top, we've got 1 head over there, 1 head over here, and 1 head over there. So when it's grown up, it's actually split into 3 different heads. Now this is our blocky pepper where we actually only want 2. So that means we have to make a decision between this one, or this one on what we want to keep. So how do you make that decision? Well, it comes down to a couple of things. The first prune, I like to select heads that are the most even. So by even, I mean in terms of development, but also in height. So now I've dropped you down, you actually have a view from the side of the heads. And you can actually see that they're actually quite even. Like in terms of the height, there's not one that's half the size of the other. This one here does look a little bit lower than the other one, but none of the two are that bad. And as you can see on the first level here, I've actually already removed the fruit. So there was the main fruit that's in the split, and the reason I've removed that is that it takes quite a bit of energy from the plant to actually develop and swell that fruit. And at the time, the roots haven't actually gone into the slab. Actually, now you can start to see some of the roots going into the slab. And that is a good point because that tells us now that we can actually start to set and swell fruit. Each of our 3 heads actually have a fruit, so they're actually all growing at the same point. So in regards to this, it doesn't really matter which one you take. It does help if you take the one from the middle because that's the one that's closest to its neighbor over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this shoot down the bottom here and break it off. So you can see here, we no longer need this anymore. And that leaves us with 2 heads and 2 fruits, and with the middle fruit gone. Some people call it the crown fruit, fruit number 1 for example. So these 2 fruits are going to be our first ones on the plant. Now if we come to our next plant, as you can see here, we've got our fruit in the crown that we're going to remove. And now we have our 3 shoots here, which we're going to choose the best 2. So I'm going to, again, they look pretty even, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the middle one. Sometimes you get 2 fruits in the middle, so you're going to have to remove both of them. On the next one here, it's a good example of actually where you get a weaker head. This head here is quite a bit shorter and less developed than the others. You can see this one's got a second split, and this one's got a second split, and this one's still short. So in this regards, this is the one I want to take off because it's the least even. And then we're going to go into the middle and we're going to take our fruit out. The next plant here, it only split twice, which is common. Normally they split 2 to 3 times, sometimes 4 if they're quite strong. So in this one, all you have to do is actually remove the crown fruit. This next plant's quite a bit weaker, and you can see even the crown fruit here is aborted. And you can tell it's aborted because it's turning yellow like this. And the reason it's turned that is because probably at that point the plant wasn't strong enough to actually look after that fruit, and it's decided that no, I don't want that fruit now, I want to put energy into the plant. On these smaller ones where they split, what you can do if you're more concerned about energy is that instead of removing the whole stem, what you can do is come down and leave the stem with a leaf on it. Now what that's going to do is it's going to give this plant a bit more energy because this leaf is going to capture sunlight. It's also going to make the plant microclimate a bit better because it's going to help with the humidity around the plant and make it a little bit more vegetative too. If your plant's too strong and your flower's too strong and you're concerned about setting, the longer you leave this first fruit on, the more energy the plant's going to put into this fruit. What that's going to do is it's going to take power away from the flower, which is going to help reduce the strength of the flower, potentially the vegetativeness of the flower, as the plant's putting its energy into this fruit. Then once you've got that next fruit set like this, and it's swelling and the plant's putting its energy into the new fruit, you come along and then you take it off. Traditionally, I do like to take the fruit off even as a flower. That way, if you're in a greenhouse with heating, you're able to put the energy into the plant and speed into the next fruit instead of wasting energy on this fruit that's going to be useless, and we actually don't want to grow it. You can see by the shape on this first fruit that it was a very strong and vegetative flower, and actually if you let this one grow out, it's going to end up being a second class piece of fruit. The next fruit up here looks a lot better and the color's nice and green, and it's going to be a first-class piece of fruit that we can sell with no issues. This next plant is a special one actually. If you look at the stem, you can see that it's actually two stems fused together, and then when it has split, it's split into multiple different heads here. Normally on the second level you only get two splits. As you can see here, it's split into a V, where this one's split into multiple parts. Normally what I would do is, if I had three heads, I would just remove this whole stem and get rid of this mess, but we've only been left with two. So that means we're going to have to prune down these heads to a single one. We can see this head here is actually a single head, but the plant's actually continuing to grow. It's dichotomy on this one. So this is the one we want to get rid of, and we're going to continue with this one as the main. The same thing's happened on this next plant here, and it makes the decision quite easily when it splits and it gives you this nice big strong single stem, and that allows you to go ahead and just remove this side here. So now you can see, after I've done the prune, we now have a bit more room around each plant for the leaves to grow. And this is only the first prune. We're going to need to come through again and reselect the next lot of heads, because you can see they have a second split on the next level. You don't want to go ahead and remove too much leaf at once, because what's going to happen is that's going to be quite generative, and the plant's going to struggle for a few days after it recovers to develop some new leaves and grow again. And it has a large impact on the microclimate of the humidity around each of the plants too. So next up we have the sweet pointed, which I have red and yellow here. These ones I'm going to also prune 2 on 1, which is what we just did on the blockies as well. Traditionally you do 2 or 3 heads per plant. It depends on the vigor. So if you have a really strong variety, Paloma for example by Rakshwan, they tend to like 3 heads. This variety is a bit weaker, and also I want to go a bit more fruit size, so instead I've planted the density higher. So I've got 5 cubes per slab, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of the traditional 4. That means I'm going to have 5 cubes with 2 plants in each. That's 10 with 2 heads each, 20 heads per slab. Whereas over here we've got 4 cubes, 8 plants with 2 heads each, 16. So we've got 16 heads per slab versus 20. There's nothing different here. We're still going to do the same process of selecting the best 2 heads and removing that crown flower slash fruit. You can also see on these sweet pointed fruit that they come through quite a bit longer, so you can tell the difference at this stage between the different varieties. The plant's also quite a bit skinnier. It's still leafy, but the leaf is a different shape and it's a bit skinnier as well. These ones do like it if you leave a bit more leaf on. But I also find that the sweet pointed varieties, they're also quite a bit stretchier, where the internode length is going to be a bit longer, so they suffer from low light more than what the blockies would. Sometimes also the reason that they split 2 or 3 times can depend on the irrigation and the climate at germination, when they were blocked on, if they dried down too much as well. So now we move on to the snacking caps. And as I mentioned, I've got orange and yellow, so there's 2 different varieties, they're slightly different, but we're going to be pruning these on 3 heads. Now where it comes in difficulty is that these plants, they only seem to have split twice. In an ideal world, you actually want 3 heads. Again, 2. This is what you're looking for. So you've got 1, 2, and 3. So this one, on its first prune, you're actually going to leave all of them and just remove the crown fruit. This one's also split, but see it's got a weak 3rd head. You can go ahead and keep this one, or if you want to decide later on, we can choose between the heads on these next two. These two heads are a lot more even, and this one down here is quite a bit weak. So I would actually remove this one even though it's got a third head, and we actually decide between these four later on. So again, this plant here, it's got the two heads we want. We're just going to go ahead and remove those bottom fruit from the split. This plant as well, unfortunately it's only got the two heads, so we're just going to go ahead and remove the fruit from the split. This one's got two heads and it's actually aborted the fruit in the split, so that means we don't have to do any pruning on this one. This one has split three ways, 1, 2, 3, and all three heads look pretty even, so that one's actually a good plant. This one's split twice, it's got a little bit of leaf growth in the bottom. If you leave that, it'll shoot into another head, so remove that. This one's a bit of a monster. It's only split twice, but it's got quite a big fruit. That one's already a couple of weeks old. That one could have been removed a lot earlier. This guy's a bit of a champ. He's quite a bit taller than the rest of them, as you can see. It's got a very long, stretchy base. He's got a lot of energy because he's also putting out lateral shoots down below the split. But unfortunately, we only have to take these two off. If you wanted to try and make this plant a bit weaker, you could leave this fruit on a bit longer to take a bit of energy away from it. This one also, it's only split twice, so we're only going to remove the fruit. So now that's what I call the first prune, where we're selecting the 2 or 3 most even heads that we have on the crop. The next prune is going to be pretty much the same, but you do need to wait till the next head is an appropriate size. So you have that first split with the 2 or 3. If the second split is too short and it hasn't grown out, it's going to be hard to make a good decision. So usually between the first and the second prune, you're probably going to be waiting about a week. That's going to help you make the best decision possible, and it's also going to make the job a lot quicker. If it's really small and you're trying to get in there microscopic to prune it, you're probably going to make a mistake, accidentally touch that flower bud or damage the fruit that's coming through, and that's going to lose your production. Alright guys, that wraps up this week's episode on doing the first prune on your peppers. I decided to split this video into 2 parts, so expect that next week you're going to see level 2 and level 3 of the prune. Level 1 kind of covered a bit of the theory around the pruning as well. Level 2 is going to be more so just focused on how to do the prune on the 2nd and 3rd level. Otherwise this video is going to be way too long, and people can't sit for 40 minutes of pruning peppers. I'm sure maybe some of you could. If the video was helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you've got any questions about what I'm doing and what I said, put them down in the comments below, and subscribe, and look forward to next week's video, which is going to be on pruning level 2 and 3. Thank you again for watching. See you for the next one. Cheers.